How's it going?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Good, good.
Yeah.
You got some sunshine over there in Connecticut today?
Yeah, it's kind of chilly, but the sun is shining, so, it's things are going okay.
That's good.
How about by
That's
you?
good. We got a lot of beautiful sunshine, wind like nuts, and it's pretty chilly.
Hmm.
Tonight it's supposed to go down to 24, which is are you getting low temps tonight?
Yeah, I haven't seen exactly. I haven't left my house yet today, so I haven't looked at the temperature. I've been doing office work all day. But I've seen some other brewers in the state who there's cool ship brewing where you put the beer outside overnight to chill down and kind of take on natural. It cools overnight and the steam and condensation kind of inoculates it with wild yeast. So
Mhm.
it's normally something you do during the winter, but I've seen a couple people firing up their cool ships and brewing that style, which is weather dependent. So I'd assume it's going to be cold tonight.
It is. We've got to put our blankets on our plants. That's what we're
Yeah.
doing. Yeah, yeah. So why don't you tell people what you do in general? Kent
Sure.
Falls Brewing and the farm. Okay.
So we started Ken Falls Brewing. We started working on it in about 2011, and we're now about operational for about 5 years. We've been on our farm for this will be year 8, I believe. And so the farm the idea is kind of an interconnected supply chain within ourselves, and then really working on expanding that outwards. And that's where a lot of our local malt and working with hop farms and orchards and whatnot in the area comes from. So on our farm, we raise chickens for eggs and meat. We raise pigs for meat, as well as pasture management. We've grown hops. We've dabbled in berries and.
Oh no, we lost you for a second. That's okay.
Yeah, I got my screen time alert. So, and our we brew a beer. Our local malt that we bring in gets composted out in the back, then gets put on our hops, which grow and then go back into the beer, and a very virtuous circle or closing the loops on a lot. And that our experiences raising chickens and selling chickens at farmers markets and dabbling in whatever area of farming that we have really taught us a lot about supply chains and what farms need to succeed, and going from, well, it's really great that people on a holiday or a special dinner would buy our chickens, to us kind of going it would be really nice if you bought them every day, that's kind of what we need. To working with farmers who grow ingredients at scale for our beer, or grow some ingredients and want to get to scale so it's profitable. Yeah, so we're all about working directly with the people who grow our ingredients. It's the best source of quality control, and with our customers directly. We self-distribute all our beer in Connecticut, or in Connecticut we self-distribute all of our beer. But having those relationships has been something that's helped us stay open and keep selling our beer during these obviously different times. And yeah, so now we're offering curbside pickup and distributing to package stores. And at our brewery, we're offering produce from a local farm, our eggs, and soon to be ground up grain flour. So trying to make it as much like our days at the farmers market, and the one stop shop that we envisioned as possible.
That's awesome. Yeah, so diversity, you saw was key from the beginning on the
Yeah,
land.
definitely. I mean, we
And
are. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, 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 keep describing it.
Our farm sits at the bottom of Kent Hollow, which is kind of in the southeast corner of our town, Kent, and we have a lot of wetlands. So when we first moved onto the farm, it was a retired dairy farm, and it took a couple of years of mowing the pastures and running animals over them before they've now dried out to be moderately. They're still wetlands, but they're usable pastures. Animals are happy out there, and having diversity and rotating things, and not just being able to say this is the one area where we do this one thing nonstop, has been a huge benefit. One thing, so my office used to be in the top corner of the brewery, and it overlooks our main pasture, which is wetlands. And my partner John, who runs our farm, developed and designed these chicken tractors. So they're, chickens live in them and you move them every day, and it's got a heavy wood base so predators can't get in. And where they end for the year, you would still see the tractors, or if they were moved, you see the kind of footprint going backwards. And in the spring, you see all the dead grass start to turn green inside the circles or inside the rectangles where the chickens were. And in the 3 inches between them, it's still dead grass. And, every spring it's this like aha moment of like, look, it's fertilizing faster, and, the cycle is working. And, it's very, it's always like exciting and reassuring to see from, a high angle or whatnot. And the
Right.
next day, the next ones would turn green.
That's awesome. Even before a pandemic, seeing life happen. And today is Earth Day, so
Today is Earth Day. It's funny, we have moderated at times how many chickens that we grow. And, there was a year we did like 3,000 meat birds, and it was,
wow.
yeah, it was a lot, and like really taxing, and managing the brewery and the farm. We kind of move pieces around and see what this proper scale is year by year. And we're going heavier with our farm this year. It's not going to be any less work, but we're seeing the value of people reaching out. We sold through all of our birds from the previous winter that we raised, and all of our pork is gone. So people were really thankful to that we were being able to offer it. So we're going to continue doing that, because people really it seems to be a good communal need right now.
And so the interest in food spiked once. Yeah, talk about that. How did people find out that you have food from the beer or?
So a little bit of both. I mean, when you go to our website, there's pictures of the farm, and on Instagram, we're, putting pictures of the ducks we have for eggs this year. And, we're always sharing what's going on. We'd write about it on our website, but when you go to our web store, we added the chickens. So it's all contactless. So when you normally walk into our tasting room, there's a freezer is the first thing you see, and you can pick it up and see pork jowl and birds and, chicken feet and sausage and, like things that we raise on the farm. And, we haven't had other farms products in our tasting room in quite a while. But as this has kind of developed, we made the decision to really try and make that a focus, where we're next week, I think, launching kind of a new web store where we redesigned it to make it a little easier for people to navigate. But we have produce up there, and right now it's a small selection because of the time of the year. But as the season goes on, I think whether or not curbside pickup and all of the pandemic related changes are required. Oh, what's up, Rocco? We're going to keep offering produce and grains and eggs. I got a spam call.
And fill in the pantry.
Yeah, exactly. That's it's why wouldn't we, if we have access to it and we talk about how great local supply chains are, why not help everybody out and be a point where people can grab all this stuff to go.
Right. I mean, as I don't think we can say there's anything good about the way the world has changed. No. We can't say that. But the opportunity for regional and local connections is a good that's come out of the terrible situation.
Yeah. I mean, I think, if there's anything to come out of it, like a paradigm shift in the way people consider supply chain is like the least cool word to most people
right.
to think about it, but like where you get your things from. There are like local companies making offers to other local companies of, hey, if you do this, we'll help you out in whatever way, whether it's longer terms on an invoice because things aren't normal, or we can get it to you at unusual times because the deliveries are different. Those are things where I know for myself already, when somebody has gone out of a way to help you out, and when in a time like this or others, those are where like bonds are formed that you want to keep, that you are hard to break. And when things do go back to normal, you still like to get your coffee from this shop in the morning because that's where you feel most comfortable. It's those are the things that I think we'll see. Hopefully, people pick up and really embrace locally.
Right. That local food is a routine. It's not
Yeah,
not
yeah.
a
It takes
extraordinary occasion.
it takes more work, but it tastes better, right? And like we do farm tours. We're hoping to organize some virtual ones where Saturday afternoons, when the tasting room is open, we'll pour everybody a beer that we only make for the farm tour. It's this really beautiful 3.5%, lightly hoppy, lightly tart saison that made with all local grains from Connecticut, and we'll walk around and talk about everything. And one of the lines that we've said is like, we work really hard to raise these chickens this way so that like all you have to do is like salt, pepper, put it in the oven, and like you're good. But that's where a lot of it is. I was never much of a baker. My grandparents were bakers, but I baked their pound cake, but I'd never baked bread until social distancing and quarantine life, and I'm obsessed now. And it's like one is Andrea will put some bags on a pallet and send it when we get our brewery orders, and it's better. It's like it is the bread is great. I'm definitely not an excellent baker, but I attribute a lot to like cooking or baking with fresh ingredients, and you just yeah, when you put in the extra work, or when you're able, and it's certainly harder to do some of these things. I don't think it's easy to do now, but I also think it's amidst the daily life and routine of going to work and coming back and doing all the other things that we normally do. It does take time to make sure you're getting or to source locally. Like that's.
It takes time, but the flavor and the situation is worth it, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah. I was
You're
reading
laughing.
the question. Yeah, Rocco. It's dealer's choice. Uh, I'm not going to tell people. I think they're healthier cooked.
Yeah, yeah. We're not going to get any food safety news involved in
Yeah,
this
yeah.
scenario. So, how did you get into food and beer and farming, Barry? What's the
So I mean, you can see my bookshelf. It's mostly filled with books about like problems with the world. It's a really
Uh-huh.
depressing. Well, I shouldn't say depressing, uplifting, because they offer some solutions. Or like Fast Food Nation was, I think, the first book that I read about the food system, where I was like, gross,
Yeah.
uh, and kept reading about it, and became very interested in food. I grew up in a town in New Jersey where my grandparents had the bakery. It was, there was a baker, a butcher, and all, a farm stand or whatnot, where we knew all of the people in town, and they had closed their bakery by the time I was born. It was still a bakery, and we knew the owners, the guy that ran it. And I always said I wanted to reopen their bakery, and my grandparents were like, "Are you out of your mind? Like, we were immigrants with an 8th grade education. Like, we didn't open a bakery to be like cute. Like, this was the way we could make a living." And they made a living, but it was always like grandparents' cakes and whatever they made was like a huge part of just family life and upbringing, and I loved it. I think the brewery is like some realization of wanting to do that, but not necessarily also heed their advice of not opening a bakery,
Yeah.
which I'm not saying is a bad thing to do. That was just drummed into my head that I should go to college, and I don't think studying philosophy was their other what you should do. But yeah.
Yeah, so that's why you're in food, because
Yeah, that's I grew
thinking
up.
doesn't pay, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, the other thing that I love about beer is that like, there's 4 ingredients to make beer, and they're pretty simple, but there's so many different varieties, and I view like beer as the reason there's so many craft breweries in America and now the world is because people generally like beer, so it's not hard to like package the way that you want to see the world or the way that you see things and say, here, we all like this. Like, tell me if you like also the way that I see that this should be. So, you know, where the ingredients are from, is it high alcohol or low alcohol? Like all these things that you want to make, you just, you know, it's like a very personal, I take it as like, I think we all do at the brewery, like a personal thing about who and where and what we're doing. And so you package that kind of like worldview a little bit.
And tell us about the grains that are in your beer.
So we have we are now 100% locally grown malt, locally grown, malted, flaked, raw. Any grain we use is from one of two malt houses. So Spencer Thrall Family Malt in Connecticut, and Valley Malt, Andrea and Christian and Margot out in Hadley. We've been working with Andrea since the very beginning. So the first beer we brewed was 100% Valley Malt. And when we first opened 5 years ago, it was a lot harder to get Valley Malt, or certainly even Connecticut grown barley that was sent to Valley Malt. So we really have worked through a lot of like finding some farmers, or Andrea would find a farmer in Connecticut, because we have a town regulation that says if we were to open the brewery on a farm, we have to use ingredients from within 50 miles for a certain percentage of it. So we've always met that, and it's been, you know, through hell or high water of finding somebody to grow grain, or somebody grew wheat and we used it raw, whatever it might be. And now to being 100% locally grown, and kind of some of the incredible experiences through that was like, at one point, Andrea, you know, I brought a bunch of beers up to Andrea and I said, why do these all taste differently for one reason or another, you know, outside of the differences in the beer? And we kind of traced what varieties of barley they were, what farms they came from. And it became apparent that not all barley varieties taste exactly the same. And she proposed doing a variety sensory analysis, where she came down to the brewery and had six varieties of barley, all done in the same Pilsner malt process. Then it was with a pale ale. Then we compared it to commercial varieties. And there was one variety that stood out, and I know we're not the only brewery or group that chose Endeavor as the like variety that we love, but we said we want to brew with this. How do we do that? And Andrea explained, well, we have to get seed, and then we have to get the seed grown to have enough for commercial use, and that, you know, and you go down, and 2 years later we now get all the Endeavor we want from Andrea. It's great. It just takes a long time. Spencer opened up and has, you know, a different story than, I think, you know, opening up years after Andrea did, but has a really old family of farms since the 1600s, and grew barley as a cover crop for tobacco. He was one of the major shade tobacco farms in the country, if not world, and would decided, looking for, you know, a kind of the next crop or thing that the farm would do, decided to open up a malt house because he has experience and all the infrastructure to grow quality barley. And he started growing malting barley, synergy variety, instead of just tilling it under, or, you know, whatever it might be. And opened up, I think it was in 2017, late 2017. And it's been fantastic. And we use his malt in probably 60-70% of our beers, and 40% or so, 50 to 40% is from Andrea. So yeah, I mean, it's been really great working with them. You know, I love being able to text the person that makes something and with a question about it, or, you know, just to say, how great is this? You know, thank you.
It's really amazing. And I think as I have these conversations with people in different parts of the country, it keeps popping up that grains are not the first thing on someone's farm bill, right? They're not always a grain farm. The grains are secondary to whatever higher value crop. So that just speaks to another reason why this grain, the re-regionalization of grain, is lagging so much behind the awarenesses of local meat and local milk and local produce. It's it's not upfront to
Yeah, and
grow
I think,
grains.
and I think another reason is in some ways retail or the direct to consumer ability, right? You
Hmm.
go to the farmer's market, and if somebody's like, "Do you want a 50-pound bag of wheat berries?" Like, you're, well, why? What do I do, right?
Yeah.
But there's flour and there's local bread, but not the grain itself. So people don't necessarily connect it with, well, is the grain for the local bread local as well? Or a farmer, I can imagine from the farming perspective, if you're growing all of it and filling 5-pound bags of, or milling 5-pound bags of grain, that's a lot more work. And then to get it to retail, where, we've talked about the like square footage of, one can of IPA is 4 square feet of barley, right? One bread loaf is 16 square feet, I think. Is that right?
Something like that,
Some
16, 18. Yep.
somewhere around there. If you have hundreds of thousands of square feet, right? It's like and that's what you need to grow to be viable. How many bags do you have to do by hand, and what time is that happening in, right?
Right.
So, that's, I think, one of the like harder to access things. I shouldn't say harder, yeah, but challenges to like connecting individuals with grain
Yeah.
farmers.
I think there's so much in the social understanding. Like, we love our brewers, we love our bakers because they're the last people who've touched this stuff that we really enjoy. And it's so hard to, okay, you have to imagine the mill. And that's not really in, I mean, you got millstones holding up mailboxes. You have the name Miller everywhere. There's not, I mean, we have these artifacts, these residues, but it's kind of like, we don't understand it. We don't have a social understanding, let alone of what grain farming is, besides those words, amber waves of grain.
Yeah, I
There's,
mean, I I don't think I connected until I was an adult. Like, I didn't think about that line in the agricultural sense for a long time. It's just like part of, say, okay, great. But yeah, you know,
no, we don't think
I
about it.
probably shouldn't admit that.
No, I think it's really important to admit that we're just, even the people who have, some kind of true north in grains these days, doesn't mean that you start with some kind of innate knowledge or compass to it. We
No.
all have moments of, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I saw, really, like, was up closer in a barley field, was like a field day at Valley Mall before the brewery was even open. And the like coolest, the thing I was most excited about was to like run my hand through it like in Gladiator and like, and yeah, it's like it's you don't, it's a really hard thing to connect to if you're not familiar with it, the
If you're
scale
not,
that it takes. And yeah.
and you have no tactile experience. You
Yeah.
do have a tactile experience with a beer, you
Yeah.
know, we're
And
very
exactly.
acquainted with that. Yeah. So there's just too many people in the supply chain, but that's what we're trying to do with the Northeast Grain Shed, is to make it tangible, make
Yeah.
all the work visible.
One of the things, a common thread, and you read books about the food system or by chefs, and it's like their devotion to working with certain farmers, or Third Plate is like an incredible book, and the way he talks about like the sourcing and the people doing creative things to make all of the agricultural products, or seafood, sustainable and flavorful, and that those two go hand in hand. I think that really shines a lot of light on the base level, the start of the supply chain, where things start, both
Yeah.
environmentally and, at scale, talking about grains and how to get commodities to taste good.
And you came up with the 4 square foot idea
Yeah.
initially. Talk us through that.
So when we just it's pretty cool. So we are now releasing like what is kind of our signature, what will be our signature IPA, I think. We worked for 5 years, the first 5 years that we've been open, on really getting to like 100% local malt. And when we first opened up, we were brewing saisons, and that was really, we didn't have that many tanks. We didn't have a means to package, or also brew beer without wild yeast and things, so we didn't want to contaminate any clean beer that we would brew. And when we started brewing IPAs, we got a couple more tanks, and we said they'll be draft only because we don't have good packaging equipment for cans or bottles. So, we're going to like segment these in some ways because there's a very clear-cut definition of what, let's just say, like IPA should be, right? And in some ways that didn't incorporate local grain. We only had enough, so we were going to brew 100%, and it was going to be the farmhouse beers. It's stylistically appropriate. And as we started brewing and they got more popular and the IPAs sell a lot faster, we saw all of our other beers start to take smaller volume that had local malts because they don't sell as quickly. They take longer to produce. They go in oak barrels, so they take more space. And one of the big things that was striking me was like, I don't want to abandon these. I love working with local malt, and it's like we're a farm. It's not just stylistically appropriate in beer. It's appropriate for, I think, anybody, but like certainly a farm brewery to be attached to the growing of their inputs. And we kind of said, okay, well, let's make a local malt IPA. And this was coinciding with like doing sensory tests with Andrea. And, we were at this point getting good malt it's been good malt, enough malt to make a 100% locally grown IPA. And I kind of started looking at it saying, okay, well, if we do this and it takes off, how much more can we do with this? And the argument I was trying to make by the 4 square feet is, it's all well and good if I make, niche beers that take 3 years to make, or spend a lot of time in oak barrel, cost $15 and, might sit on a shelf longer or sell through slower. But if that's the only thing I make, then it's not actually good for the farmer. So damn with stylistic, appropriate, whatever you want to say. And so it's like, well, if IPA and lagers are what's selling, we got to commit ourselves to make our IPAs and lagers with local malt. So I looked for the quantifiable impact that would have, and I figured out it was roughly, I'm very impressed my math worked on this, about 4 square feet for the can of IPA. And when we put it out, it was like, this is a cool thing that I can tell you the impact you're having. And it's not just like a theoretical made with local malt. It's like, I can tell you what this is, and if you want to know about how big malt barley farms are, that's the next question. Or what's the next question when I share this information on our farm tours, the question I get is like, is that a lot?
Yeah, right.
And it's a good question. It's really hard to kind of figure out what that means, but that's the nice part about it. It's malleable. If somebody says, whoa, that's how many square feet is a barley field? How many square feet is an acre? Whatever the question is, you'll eventually get to like sustainability and, the scale question, which is what's needed.
And you came up with that idea a year ago-ish or more?
It's probably like 2-3 years ago that like have used it. I think, no, let's say the beginning of like end of 2017, beginning of 2018.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think the first time I like publicly really said anything about it was probably like 2018.
I love the logic of it. I love the rationale of building something that fits where you are, fits the, because we may be philosophically above commerce, but we are participating in a commercial life, and we have to figure out how to keep paying the taxes and keep paying everybody.
I would early on, right when, we brew a batch of our field beer is the name of it, Farmhouse Ale, and 100% Valley Malt, always has been, always will be. And, Andrea would text me like, hey, we got more grain. Are you able to take another pallet? And there were times where I would be like, no, I haven't sold this beer yet. Like I need to sell this one first. And when we started selling IPAs and they were selling much quicker, I didn't want to, you connect that. And it's the same thing I was talking about with the chickens, right? It's like don't just make us the like expensive rare dinner. It's like it won't be that expensive if we all do this more frequently, and people can scale and grow businesses and be viable rather than a treat, you know. So that's part of the like, yeah, that's it's all of these different experiences that fed into, you know, going, well, you know, if I calculated the square footage of the can, and okay, well, how many cans do we sell, and how much of a barley field is that farm is that, and it's not much. So, you know, yeah, it's about
It's
supporting the
so
people you work
cool.
with, you know.
I really love it, and it's such a great idea to steal from you for the Northeast Grain
I
Shed
It
group.
was not stolen. I was so, first of all, like when, you know, I've talked to Andrea about it a bunch, you know, before the grain shed stuff, and when it actually like gained traction in that conversation, the talent and, you know, intellectual capacity and like planning and just the way that like it was taken and actually became something way bigger than like I could ever have just like running my brewery also done it. And like that's where, you know, yeah, it was, I thought it was amazing. I was like very,
Well,
very like,
it's such a good story of how it, you know, it solved the practical problem for you to link people to locale and, you know, get your beer in their houses. And now it's part of the way that we at the Northeast Grain Shed